Happy Sunday, Packer fans. Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. My name is Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Today, I want to dive into some of the quote-unquote beautiful mysteries that are lying sort of under the radar on this Packers roster. A couple of these maybe not so under the radar, but some of them certainly are. And what I consider a quote-unquote beautiful mystery at this point, as Aaron Rodgers has sort of coined that phrase as of late, but what I consider that is players that we just frankly don't know what they are at this point. They could be great, they could be nothing, they could be cut, they could be a core member of the team this season, and we simply just don't know at this point. Now, I want to point out that you could put pretty much any rookie or undrafted free agent this season on that list, right? All of them, we've got to see a couple mini camps worth, and we, of course, and I'm going through and breaking down the tape of what they were in college and trying to go through that entire series right now. But I'm not going to be talking about the rookies today because, again, those are kind of their own category. I'm looking at other players who, again, some of them very under the radar, others very much not, but who we just don't know. We haven't had the opportunity to kind of unravel some of that mystery and figure out exactly what they're going to be for this Packers team. So I've identified 9 of these players, and I'm going to go through them relatively quick. I don't think I need to do deep dives necessarily on each of these players, but I do think it's kind of worth running down these players and what they maybe could or couldn't bring to the team. So let's start off with, I know, a lot of people's favorites, and that's Yoshineshman, right? Yoshineshman is a incredibly interesting player. And when you talk about a guy that, when people say first off the bus, what that means is you want your biggest, strongest, tallest guy, like just best shape. Like you want that guy coming off the bus first. So if the other team's watching you, like that's the guy that like they're going to be like, oh crap, we have to face this team. So that's what it means to have like first guy off the bus mentality. Yoshineshman is the guy that you want as the first guy off the bus. He fits everything from a prototypical offensive tackle standpoint. He's got great size. He's got, big arms, big hands. Like he is a prototypical left tackle prospect in the NFL. In fact, I would go as far to say, if you were completely numb to everything and had no idea, didn't get to watch them practice, just lined up the Packers offensive linemen across a fence and were picking teams at middle school recess and said, all right, which guy do you want first? It would not be David Bakhtiari. It would not be Elton Jenkins. It would probably be Yoshineshman, right? Just based fully off of looks only. He is an interesting guy. And of course, he was an undrafted free agent. His technique was all over the place. They've invested 2 full seasons. And remember, he came in the year that Matt LaFleur came in. So they've invested 2 full seasons under Matt LaFleur already. He knows this offense. He knows the offensive linemen surrounding him. He should hopefully be ready to potentially take that step. And it should be noted that there's not exactly that prototypical swing tackle. Let's just say Bakhtiari's your left tackle, Billy Turner's your right tackle. We don't know that that's fully going to be the case. Bakhtiari's injury plays a part. Where do they line up Elton Jenkins? There's definitely question marks there. But if you got those 2 as your starting right tackles, we know Elton Jenkins can kick out, but usually you just have like Jared Valdir, right? Is a perfect example of a guy can play left tackle, play right tackle, and who's ever hurt, he just goes in and fills that spot. Rick Wagner, to an extent, was that as well. He went in at right tackle when they had the injury at left tackle. They started Wagner there. It didn't go well. So they just basically kept him at right tackle. But that's the type of player that you're looking for, right? I'm sure there's some hope that Green Bay would love Nijman to be that type of guy, that maybe he's not starting, right? But if somebody, one of those guys goes down, he can go in and at least hold his own. We as in the, fans and, those in the media, whatever, I'm not a member of the media, but you know what I mean? Like, we just don't know at this point. We haven't got a really good look at him, and with no preseason or any of that last year, we didn't get to see how far he is in his progression either. So really interesting player, a lot of upside, a million question marks still surrounding his game. So that's one of the bigger, both figuratively and literally, question marks on this roster right now. That's an interesting one. Another one is KB Anento. So this is, to me, an incredibly interesting one. So you go back 2 years ago when he was an undrafted free agent. He was a wide receiver in college. They transitioned him to corner, and I really liked what he did in training camp in 2019. And he had great ball skills, was consistently making plays in practice, gave up some plays in practice as well. But you're talking about a guy that just transitioned from wide receiver to corner, and he was already flashing plays on the practice field. That's an impressive feat to have. And then fast forward, so he was out most of that season. I think he was either on the injured list or part of the season on the practice squad. But then he comes on in 2020. And he makes the 53-man roster despite being injured through the majority of that training camp. They felt that strongly about him that they put him on the 53-man roster and did not subject him to waivers, so that when, once all the waivers were done, they could put him on IR and stash him on the roster long term, pay him for the entirety of the season, basically keeping him on IR for the entire year. He never recovered, didn't get to play all season, and certainly that's something that's going to hurt him. When you're an undrafted guy, you just can't have injuries. It derails you so quickly, and he had injuries in 2019 and then was out the entire season in 2020. But wide receiver to cornerback, and the fact that he made the 53 and they really wanted to keep him around should tell you all you need to know about what they thought about his potential upside. He was a player I really had my eye on a season ago. You'd think probably behind the 8 ball now, but I'm still really intrigued by who he is as a player. And obviously Green Bay had some value in him going into the regular season, even with him being a little bit banged up. Next is Patrick Taylor, another player who basically redshirted last season with an injury, got some practice time towards the end of this year, was nice enough to come join me here. If you haven't had a chance to check out that bonus episode, I did get a chance to interview Patrick Taylor. It was great. So make sure to check that out. But going back to rookie minicamp when I was there, a week ago, this is a massive dude. And AJ Dillon is built out a little wider, certainly on the lower half. Obviously, insert thigh pun, nickname here. But Patrick Taylor is tall and big, and you just this is not a guy that you want to see, meet in the hole if you're an inside linebacker or a safety, cornerback, etc. I am really intrigued. He's got some natural hands on him. I think he's going to be a inside the tackles runner. I'm just really interested to see what he has the opportunity to bring to the table for this team. You go back to his time at Memphis, and I talked to him about this. That was a stable of impressive running backs, and he was always right there in the mix as getting, basically the second most carries amongst some really impressive talent on that Memphis team. So I'm intrigued, to say the least. I think he would have been a draftable player in 2019 had it not been for the injury. Because of the injury, because of the redshirt season, he doesn't get drafted. And now basically Green Bay almost has another draft pick this year in Patrick Taylor that I'm excited to see what he can do in OTAs and training camp and so on and so forth. Next up is kind of the duo here of Henry Black and Vernon Scott. And both of these players, when given opportunities, looked good on film a season ago, just didn't get a ton of playing time. With Raven Green gone, I could easily see a scenario where Vernon Scott plays a little bit more in the box. I could easily see a scenario where Henry Black works himself into the number 3 safety ahead of a Vernon Scott, ahead of a Will Redmond and those guys as true safeties. I think he's that talented. So both of those guys are really interesting, and both are going to play huge roles on special teams. Both have great opportunities to make the roster. So those are 2 more players that we just don't have a ton of tape on, and I'm definitely really intrigued by. The next one is another player who basically had an entirely redshirt season a season ago, and that was Simon Stepaniak, right? So another 6th-round pick right alongside Jake Hansen and John Runyon Jr. Simon Stepaniak would have been probably a early day 3 guy, probably an early round 4, but it wouldn't have been super surprising if he fell to the end of day 2, maybe a little bit. He's probably an early day 3 guy if there was no injuries. But again, the fact that he had to sit the entirety of the last season basically and had the injury pushed him down draft boards. Green Bay gets him a little bit later in the draft. And again, basically, in a way, it's almost like trading a 6th-round pick in 2020 for a 4th-round pick in 2021, because I think had he not had the injuries, again, he's probably a 4th-round pick. You just miss a year out of him because he had the injury last year. And again, basically it's a redshirt season, but hopefully he had the opportunity to really get in the playbook. He did have some time at the end of the season to join practices. So this is a really big season, and we know how many of those interior offensive linemen that Green Bay has brought in, including Stepaniak over the last 2 seasons. Now he should be healthy. He should be ready to go. And again, it's basically like another draft pick like Patrick Taylor that, Green Bay has, because those are 2 redshirt players from a season ago. Next up is Jonathan Garvin. And you're going to kind of gain a picture of this here. Basically another guy who kind of redshirted. I think he got probably around just a little less, or right around 100 snaps maybe a season ago. Frankly, I liked what he did with those 100 snaps better than what Randy Ramsey did. Now, Ramsey had the value on special teams, which is why he got the nod over a Jonathan Garvin when it comes to being active on game days. But to me, Jonathan Garvin was the fourth best edge rusher on the team last year behind, Za'Darius Preston and Rashawn Gary. If you just had, needed somebody to be a pure edge rusher or, somebody that could set the edge, to me, Jonathan Garvin was number 4. This is a really interesting player that came out early from Miami, probably too early. But if you look back, they were expecting to have Jalen Phillips and Gregory Rousseau as the top 2 edge rushers, which basically would have pushed Jonathan Garvin back. He probably wouldn't have gotten a ton of playing time. It probably ends up being a 6th or 7th round pick again this year. But had he actually had that opportunity, and maybe had he known that Gregory Rousseau was going to opt out and he would have been able to play opposite Jalen Phillips, and he came back, this is a guy that legitimately could have been a day 2 pick if he came back and had a really impressive season with Miami in 2020 if he would have played, or 2020 if he would have played. So instead, he comes out in the 2020 draft, does not play very much at all for Green Bay. And again, basically a guy that went through a redshirt process. The fact that he was able to actually get, a handful of snaps out on the field at the NFL level, I think is going to help him this season. And to me, he's the 4th best edge rusher still on this team. Can he be an impact player on special teams? Can he get on the field more? Those are the questions that, we're going to have to see if he can answer this season. But he is a player with a lot of upside, definitely looks the part. And again, just another player I'm really excited to see how he performs in training camp. The next 2 are a little bit more of the higher profile guys on this list. The first one is Devin Functions, right? And this is so intriguing for a variety of different reasons. You go at, second round pick, plays for the Panthers, has some ups and downs, kind of some ebbs and flows as a player. Remember, Indianapolis signed him to a really big deal. It was like a 1-year, $10 million deal. I want to say felt really strongly about him when they signed him. I watched some of his practice tape that I could find online. I watched that first game. He was a better route runner. He looked more of a pure wide receiver. In Carolina, a little bit more of a slot box out type of guy. Wasn't really refined as a wide receiver. When I watched him early with his time in Indianapolis before he went out literally in the first game, I saw a player who was really starting to find himself as a true wide receiver. And then after that first game, he gets injured in that first game, goes on IR, is out the entirety of the year, and then opts out last season. So basically has not played, football in 2 years. So how is his, physical shape? Is he in shape? Has he been working on his craft? Is he going to be able to carry over some of that momentum that he was just starting to pick up during his time in Indianapolis to, now 2 years later? All of these things are really interesting, and just how much of an impact player can he be? And to be frank, he's not even necessarily guaranteed a roster spot. So he's going to be fighting for a spot. He's going to be fighting for playing time. I still think there's some decent upside here as a, kind of a bigger slot type of player. He juxtaposes really well with an Amari Rodgers, 2 very different slot type of players. And these are type of players that can be very useful in the red zone as well. So Devin Functions has the opportunity to bring a lot to the table and be a big time target in this offense. He just has to prove that he can pick up right where he left off prior to the injury in Indianapolis, and again, stay healthy and all those sort of things. So really interesting player. And then 1A, of course, on the list of beautiful mysteries heading into this season is Jordan Love. And we don't know if he's going to be needed. We don't know if he's going to be, you would think he's going to be the backup pretty much no matter what, but Blake Bortles maybe clouds that a little bit. I still think, he's the betting favorite to be the number 2 by far, assuming Aaron Rodgers comes back. But we're looking at a scenario right now where Jordan Love could have another basically redshirt season where he doesn't see the field for a single snap. He could be the starter and playing every single snap for Green Bay this year. That is a massive, beautiful mystery. He could be the next Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers. He could be the next JP Losman. We simply do not know. And likely the truth to all of that is somewhere in the middle. But this is a massive franchise-altering player in Jordan Love. And to be fair, he could get traded. We don't know. Literally a million things could happen with Jordan Love this season, from being traded away, from being the starter, from not seeing the field, to another redshirt season, to seeing the field and being great, to seeing the field and being a bust. The amount of variance that surrounds Jordan Love and the future of this Packers franchise right now is just through the roof crazy. So he is the definition of a beautiful mystery, and what's going to happen is going to be insanely interesting and a hell of a case study to watch. There's some ways it could go very right. There's some ways that it could go very wrong. And I think that's ultimately the definition of a beautiful mystery. I think as Packer fans, I'm sure all of you, fingers crossed, are hoping that he can be a legendary type player and that Green Bay is able to keep him around somehow and he can be the next in that incredible line of Green Bay quarterbacks. Only time will tell. That's going to do it for me. Thanks so much for joining me as always. I'll be right back here tomorrow. Make sure to check out today's audio podcast wherever you get your favorite podcasts. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.